I'm ashamed to say it wasn't until I got married. I was in my mid-20s before I ever voted. And it was because my husband had taken a job and was writing for this magazine that focused on grassroots activism. And here's the presidential election coming up. He's like, "You've never voted? What's wrong with you? You have to vote. If you don't vote, you can't, you've abdicated your responsibility. You can't complain about what happens if you're not even taking part."
How on earth do you find hope in a media climate like the one we have, especially if you're realistically treating all the things that are happening in the world and trying to process it from a Christian worldview? What kind of journalist is going to be able to do that? Hey everyone, welcome to the Dr. Jeff Show podcast. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify, Edify, Liftable, wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please take a moment to review it on your favorite platform to help spread the word about these interviews with these great guests. So on the show, I interview major thought leaders who show how the truth changes everything, and my guest today is one of them. Her name is Karla Dial. She's the recently appointed editor-in-chief of The Stream, which is a timely source for breaking news, analysis, and inspiration. News with hope. Karla has written extensively on matters of public policy and worked as the editorial director for a book company. She cares deeply about freedom, the dignity of life, the importance of virtue. Please welcome Karla Dial to the show. Karla Dial, welcome to the Dr. Jeff Show podcast.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
It's really going to be a fun interview. I think we're going to get into a lot of topics that are really of interest to people, especially in an election year. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history as a writer. This is pretty eclectic. Mm-hmm. You've written about fashion and bodybuilding and also politics and economics. And so tell us a little bit about who you are, why you do what you do.
God has taken me on a journey in my career. I think I've seen his hand more strongly in my career than just about anywhere in my life. It's like when I hear him speaking to me, most clearly, it's in the job. It's so weird. But yeah, I started out as a sports writer. That was my first job. I was covering Division I football and basketball as a stringer for the Albuquerque Journal. And didn't know first thing about football. And I still don't really know a lot, I'll be honest. But my journalism professor, he's like, you know what? They're not looking for somebody who's a fan. They're not looking for somebody who knows everything about it, wants to coach a team. They're looking for somebody who can tell you what's going on, describe it. And he said, you can do that. I said, okay. And he said, everything else you'll learn. And I was like, okay.
That is so good. Well, yeah. And you know, the best sports journalists are the ones who tell us about the competitors. Who are these people and what are they fighting for? Which is the same basic story that you tell everywhere. Yeah,
exactly. And, I just really liked getting inside people's heads and crawling around and seeing what was there and what made them tick. And then over the course of time, God took me away from sports through features and eventually into writing about public policy. And I realized that sports was very political and politics was very much like sports. You actually have a political football that gets tossed back and forth every time a new president gets elected.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I know it's true. When you say it, it seems obvious, but it's the same basic story. What is the point of everything that we're doing as human beings? Mm-hmm. And what are the different issues? What are the different sides? And why do they do what they do? And all of that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about The Stream. You are the editor of this publication online, has a huge influence, but yet I bet there are a lot of people who are watching or listening who it's not really in their consciousness yet. So let's get it there. Talk about what you guys are doing there.
What are we doing here? It changes every single day. What are we doing here? I think the biggest thing that I could say that we're doing here is that we are looking to bring a kingdom influence to bear on the news, because we have Catholics working for us, we have evangelicals working for us, we have Christians of every stripe. And in a time when it seems like a lot of Christians want to divide over issues and go, well, you're like this and I can't talk to you, or you're like that and you're not really saved. We're just like, you know what? We trust the Holy Spirit, and this is kind of something that our founder, James Robison, we're an offshoot of Life Outreach International. James Robison has been amazing for decades at getting people into a room who wouldn't ordinarily talk to each other. And he's like, you know what? We're all part of the same family. Unity is really important, and we need to have a kingdom focus. And if we have any other focus, we're aiming at the wrong mark. So that's kind of what I do here. That was kind of what I did at a previous job as well. I used to run a magazine focused on the family called Citizen. And by the time it landed in my hands, it was, well, we can't talk about politics directly. We can't be guilty of electioneering. We can't root for this political party or against that one. What can we do? And it's like, we can talk about how to be a grassroots citizen of the kingdom of God. And so that was kind of my focus there. And when this job came up, and that's a crazy story you should ask me about.
So how did this come up?
How did this job come up?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was working for a Christian book publisher. I was the editorial director. And I was been doing that for about 5 years. And all last year, God was saying, get ready to move. And when I would ask him, okay, tell me more. When am I moving? And he wouldn't tell me. And I'd say, okay, where am I moving? And he wouldn't tell me that either. And I'd go, okay, well, why am I moving? And he's just like, need to know basis, girl. It's not happening. So I was like, this is rather annoying, but okay, I trust you. So I was just kind of going along through my life and just holding these questions in my mind, while also trying to sell a few belongings to make it easier to move, because I don't know anything, but it's like, well, I have too much stuff. I do know that. So let's get rid of some stuff. So that's what I was doing. And just looking for clarity, listening. But the signs were clear. It's like, when God is moving you, it's like little things start coming up that never used to be a thing, like just uncomfortable situations, or you run out of grace for things that you used to have grace for. There was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. It's like, okay, I feel like I'm being ekbaloed. That's really what it felt like. It's like I could literally feel like the space around my life like contracting and squeezing, and it's like you're being thrust out into a wider place. And it's like, this is so odd. I've never experienced this before in my life, but okay, I'm going to trust you through this. And I went to church in September. I went to take a class, and I walked into this room, and there's only one person I know in the room. I went to a pretty big church. And so I walk into this room, and all of a sudden, all these people that I don't know are like staring at me. I mean, turning around to look at me, I was like, what? What is going on? I was starting to get a little defensive. And then the one person I did know, I had edited a book for him. He was leading the class. He got up and he said, hey, welcome to the class. I've asked my prophetic team, my interns, to be here. And I've just asked them to just, ask God for words for people. So team, come on forward. And then all of a sudden, everybody who'd been staring at me stood up and started highlighting me. And I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so defensive.
Wow.
So they started talking to me, and it was just like, you're in a hallway season. You're in this hallway season right now, and the dream projects that God has for you in your career are at the other end of the hall, and the community that you're looking for is at the other end of the hall. So basically just telling me to hang tight and stay put and just keep on keeping on. I was like, oh, that is so encouraging. Thank you. So it was really one of those timely words that was just like, yes, okay. So I just hung in there. And a month later, my boss called me and said, our division is being sold to another publishing company. And that publisher is going to decide who gets to keep their jobs and who doesn't. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it all wound up. So I wound up, the sale was finally completed in December. And by then I said, okay, what do I really enjoy doing? What are my dream projects? I'd had time to think this through. What are the dream projects that really bring my heart alive? It's like, I love dropping truth bombs on the enemy and blowing up the kingdom of darkness. So that's kind of what I've done throughout my career, and I was really enjoying doing it with Christian authors. So I said, I'll just expand my side business, and I'll keep on doing that from just solo. If God's in it, he told me I was an entrepreneur, he told me I was an administrator. It's like, okay, I'll just lean into that. If he's in it, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So that was what I was going to do. So I didn't really look for a job. I wasn't anxious about it. I was just like, I'll figure this out as I go along. But so I got through Christmas, and then I probably, my last day at my job was December 29th, and then I was officially between jobs. And so I was just like laying there looking at the ceiling, going, okay, I actually don't have a meeting today. I don't have anything I have to run off to do. So I should I'm probably going to have to move, so I need to give my landlord my notice. So I texted my landlord, and I was like, okay, Lord, when am I supposed to move? And he said, February 15th. So I texted my landlord. I said, okay, I'm moving. I didn't know where I was moving. I'm moving on February 15th, so that'll be my last day in the house. And started the ball rolling. It's like, I'll just put my stuff in storage. I'll figure something out. I'll probably just downsize for a while, just rent a room somewhere instead of a whole house until I get my feet under me. And so I just was going that direction. It's like it's easier to direct a moving car than it is to start one moving from scratch, right? So that was kind of the tactic that I was taking. And I think it was like maybe a day later, my former boss, the guy who hired me at the book publisher, who was looking for a job himself, by the way, he texted me and he said, hey, I just had an interview with a headhunter about this job with the stream, and you'd actually be a much better fit for it than I would. Can I give him your name? And I said, sure, why not? I mean, what have I got to lose, right? So that started this conversation. The headhunter contacted me, and she's amazing. I don't know where they found this team, but they're based in Dallas, and they're called Face Search Partners, and they're wonderful. So if you ever need one, just
I hope I don't, but yeah.
But they contacted me, and we started this conversation, and everything lined up. I mean, it was just shortly. It turned out they asked if I was available to chat with them the next day, and I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." So we had a conversation, and I asked them. I noticed that your search firm was just contracted by LOI in November. So could you give me an idea? I know these kinds of searches, it can take a while. Can you give me an idea how long this one is supposed to go on before you close the window? And they said, well, it's actually been going on for 1.5 years, and tomorrow is our last day. You're the last person we're interviewing. And I was like, oh, well, that's very interesting. And I had heard of the stream. I mean, I was aware of it because I'd seen John Smirek on Eric Metaxas' show a few times. He's one of our writers. Does an excellent job. And I had actually just edited a book a few months earlier by James Robison and Jay Richards, the co-founders of the stream. But I hadn't really made the connection just on the little that I'd seen, because like a lot of people, it wasn't really on my daily radar either. I hadn't really made the connection that it was a Christian thing or that it had anything to do with James Robison, whose name I knew. And I was like, that guy is a father. That guy is a father. And he is. So, there were quite a few things that took place in a very short space of time, about 2 weeks. They put me on the short list and told me about it a day later. They had to present 6, maybe half a dozen screen candidates to my boss, Bruce Jacobson, a day or two after I spoke with them. So they did. I was on the short list, and he wanted to talk to me, and they let me know. And I said, well, that's great. They gave me a list of windows of opportunity to talk to him, and I went for the last one because I have to put my stuff in storage, and the only day I have available to do that is the 22nd. So I can do it after that. And if I maybe take a couple of days after that to really look at the stream and figure out what's what and where's where and what I might do with a site like that, And so that's how it worked out. I moved my stuff into storage without knowing where I was moving on Monday. I spent a couple of days looking at the stream and making notes and just asking God. It's like, I was walking around my house and like this 4-step filtration system came to me. It's like, this is what I would do with the stream. It's like, what is your why? You have to know why you're writing about this. You have to know why it's important to you. What is the kingdom element? Because if that isn't there, it isn't worth doing. If I had a motto, it would say, if it's not kingdom, it's crap. And that's basically what I told Bruce in my interview with him. He thought that was hilarious. But yeah, where's the kingdom element and where's the hope? Because honestly, hope is a currency. It's a currency in the spirit. Just faith, love, and hope, right? Those are currencies. We actually invest things and we get return on investment when we have those things. So having a hopeful perspective, even when people in my industry, the news is so dark. It's so grim, because the news is so overwhelmingly bad so much of the time. Or even if it isn't, we think it is because the media tells us it is, right? You got the secular media that's basically lying to you about a lot of things going on in the world because they've got an agenda. You've got the secular conservative media that is like, oh no, the sky is falling. Oh no, so you can get kind of hung up either way, coming and going. It's like the only thing that we have going for us is a kingdom perspective, and it's hope.
Wow.
And if we can start to inject that into what we do, I think we'll really have something valuable that we can work with, because we're not breaking news. We're mostly commenting on news. Sometimes we break a little news, but it's not the norm. Everybody else is out there. You got so many outlets that are on it. We live in a 24/7 instantaneous news world. And it's like, how can we compete with that? It's like everybody else they have more money, they have a bigger staff, they're better looking. And, what have we got? We've got hope. We've got the kingdom. We have access to the mind of Christ. And so if we lean into that, that's going to be our asset.
Yeah. That is pure gold, what you just described. And it's interesting. I've watched the growth of Christian media in my lifetime, from, things that were not really commenting that much on current issues to, World Magazine and Colson Center and all these other people who are now they're on it every single day. You can actually learn your news from these sources. Yeah. Without having to try to sort through the secular narrative that's being promoted behind the story. But what you've said about hope, I think, is really fascinating. I'd not thought about this as the connection. A quick story, I went to one of the meetings you were talking about where James Robison got a bunch of people together. I could not believe the caliber of the people, first of all. These were very famous people who were in the room.
Yeah.
Second, I looked around the room and thought, that guy, I bet I disagree with him on 80% of things. I did not know that we had this 20% in common. But James saw that. He saw the connection there. Right. So it became a fascinating meeting because we just started with the assumption we don't have to agree on everything.
Right.
But what are the big society-changing issues where we are lined up and should stand shoulder to shoulder? And honestly, Karla, I had never seen that before. I had never been a part of something quite like that. I mean, I had been in debate. I was in the room with people who I knew I was 100% in opposition to, but I had never seen that thread woven together, and I had never thought about, till you mentioned it, that thread was actually hope. All right, so you know about the Colson Center, the amazing work they do, the Breakpoint podcast, the Breakpoint radio show. But did you know about the Colson Fellows? The Colson Fellows program is now accepting applications until June 30th for next year's Colson Fellows class. Here's more about it. Colson Fellows is a 10-month journey into a Christian worldview. You'll learn how God's story of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration makes better sense of the world than all the alternatives. And rather than reducing the gospel to only a matter of a person's eternal destination, Colson Fellows sees it as the story we are meant to inhabit every day. The Colson Fellows program is designed for men and women with full, busy lives, parents, grandparents, businessmen and women, teachers, pastors from all walks of life. The Colson Fellows come together to study, and then they go out into their spheres of influence. And God uses them to accomplish his redemptive purposes right in the very places that they are called. This program is a combination of readings, live webinars, daily devotionals, and cohort meetings with your peers. And the cohorts meet in person in over 60 U.S. cities or online in each time zone. Select Summit Ministries box in your application for a 25% discount. The networking and the education you're going to receive is amazing. You can apply now at colsonfellows.org. I want to dig into it because, and this is not the direction I've got my questions all lined out here of what I think we're going to talk about.
That's fine.
But talk about hope for a minute, and we'll talk about it in relation to political and economic issues specifically, if that's all right. Because
Sure.
this is what we know. The Pew Research Center, they do pretty valid polls. If they are onto something, it's probably really happening. And they said 65% of people, when they were asked about politics, said it made them feel exhausted. 55% said it made them angry. Only 10% said it made them hopeful. Mm-hmm. And 4% said they were excited about it. So hope, as if it's truly a currency, it's a very rare one for most people.
Yeah.
Help us in our minds turn this around a little bit to away from, because we maybe we have two kinds of people who are watching and listening. Everybody who's watching and listening is a learner. You would not pay attention to this show if you weren't. But some people, I don't want to think about that. I don't have the time to, that's just too, that's too negative. Other people are like, they're obsessed. They can't stop thinking about all the bad things that are happening in the world. Mm-hmm. Where should we go from the perspective of hope on these topics?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think for Christians, the answer is biblical when God says, come up here. Come up to a higher level. Get out from under the first heaven and the second heaven. Come up here from my perspective, and I'll show you great things you don't know. So if we can get above the noise and the mess and the warfare and all the stuff that's happening around us that most of which we see, a lot of which we don't see, that's driving the stuff we do see. If we can get up to God's perspective and tap into what he's saying, it's revealed in his word, and he also speaks to our hearts. So we have the Holy Spirit. We have both. We have the Logos and the Rhema working in our advantage. So if we can start to go, okay, God, what are you saying about this? We come at it from a place of peace. We come at it from a place of victory. And then we can come back down and go, okay, now I know how to pray to actually make that happen, to use the legislative authority that was given to me as a believer, as a son or daughter of God, to actually affect what's happening in the spiritual realm that then comes down, and then we see it happen in the physical realm.
Talk about that legislative authority principle for a moment. I think a lot of people, they've heard, they know ecclesia is the Greek word for church, but it didn't originally mean church.
Right.
It originally meant the called out ones, the ones who were picked out from society to represent the rest and to make decisions on behalf of the community.
Right. So basically a legislative body like the House of Representatives.
I wonder how many Christians have ever considered that you are a legislator right now. It's not like you're going to go vote once every 2 years for a legislator.
Right.
Unpack that a little bit, because I have a feeling that that's going to be the key to understand everything that happens under your watch at the stream.
Well, I would hope so. That is kind of the perspective that I come at it with. To answer your question, how many believers understand that about themselves and their identity. I would say, judging from the state of our nation right now, it's a minority. But my goal is that through what we do with the steam, please edit that out. Sometimes it feels more like the steam. We're just full of hot air. The stream, that more of them would become aware of it and start to take it seriously and to use it because it's theirs.
But how do you have hope? I mean, I'm thinking about economics, and I mean, some things are fine. If people are invested in the stock market at this moment, that's fine. You know, interest rates are high, but they're not compared to what we've had for the last 50 years. But every time you go to the grocery store, you're realizing my budget's not stretching as far as it used to.
Oh, no kidding. I bought a bag of Doritos yesterday. It was like $5.50. I was like, what? It's stupid. It should be like $3 at most.
I know. I've switched the kind of corn chips I eat because the ones I liked it was crazy, you know, a bag that's half the size and twice the price. So we know this is happening. We know things in the economic world are not right. We know, we look at the national debt and realize no amount of austerity in the next several decades would erase this problem. And it's easy to then think, oh, well, then we got competition with other countries and we're sinking. Our test scores for our kids are terrible. What's the future? You know, I mean, I'm just painting a picture just based on what I see around me.
Right.
How do you bring that perspective of hope? And by the way, I know we're talking about hope, not optimism. Like optimism is a good feeling about something.
It may happen, yeah.
Yeah, where hope is an actual willingness to engage.
Well, hope is the confident expectation of good, rather than the hopeful, hey, it might happen in the future. It'd be really nice if it did, kind of perspective. This is, I think hope is founded not in our circumstances, obviously. I mean, if we're putting our hope in that, we're toast.
Yeah.
I think we should all know better than to do that, especially right now. But hope is based in the character and the nature of God. So if we know who he is and we know that what his heart is like, even with the people of Nineveh, he's like, hey, Jonah, go tell those people what's coming. And it's because I love them. It's because I want them to turn. It's like, why will you die? Why will you insist on dying? Don't do that. I don't want that. So, sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
But people, I think that a lot of non-Christians, they don't understand that about his heart. And I think even a lot of Christians, they get so mired in their own hurt. They're like, yeah, God, smite them. Go smite them. You know, like they're at the wrestling match or the football game and they just, smite the wrong team. And it's like, that's not his primary goal. It's to rescue.
Yeah.
So getting back to hope, sorry. Wow, you're making me cry. I didn't expect that.
I never know what to expect when we do the show, honestly.
Yeah.
But something really powerful happening right now. Like we're understanding the heart of God when we're looking at the world.
Yeah. And just his heart is to rescue. And even with our nation and things that are falling apart as we see they are, we've been facing this global great reset and seeing the effects of it through all this Marxist ideology that's been in play for a lot longer than most people have been aware of it. But the enemy never created anything. Not one thing. He's a counterfeiter of everything that God has done that was good. All he does is take it and go, okay, I see the power in that, so let me corrupt it, let me pervert it, let me use it to my own ends. So God also has a great reset that he's working towards. And it's, we have a lot of faulty premises, as getting off the gold standard, and I'm not an economist, I'm not great with that. But we can see that at some point the economy is going to have to fail. It's because it's built on a house of cards right now, and it's going to blow over. So it's not really a question of if, it's more a question of when and what will actually trigger that. So how do we have hope in the midst of that? If our hope is in the economy, we're not doing well. But if we have hope that God has a plan and a design to reset our foundations on something that's more solid and enduring and eternal, that it's falling apart so that it can fall together correctly, that's where we can have hope.
I like that phrase, it's falling apart so that it can fall together. And that is entirely, whether we have that perspective is whether we're lined up to see God's perspective, right, or whether we're just trying to see it from our own perspective.
Right. It's easy to view things through the lens of our self-comfort. Well, this is comfortable for me, so therefore it must be okay. We confuse the kingdom of God with the American dream, and they aren't really the same.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more.
Well, that's a hard one to talk about because it hits really close to home.
Sure does.
It's like we think God owes us all these things, and it's like, actually, the way of the cross, God is really good, and He's kind, and He does a lot of things that we like, even though we don't deserve it. But it isn't like a reward for doing things correctly. What's our reward? It's like we have peace and joy and righteousness and hope. Those are kind of what we get for following God. We have peace in the midst of circumstances. We have, a hope that passes understanding. We don't understand it because it doesn't align with what we're experiencing. So what is the reward in the spirit for following God? It's eternal life. It's righteousness. It's right standing with Him. It's a good relationship. It's the ability to hear His voice. It's the ability to know what He's saying and to do it. It's a privilege to minister out of an overflow to other people. It isn't necessarily, a great house and 2 cars in the garage and 2.5 kids and a labradoodle. But some people like to think so.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they get that too. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Those aren't bad things.
I was given a bracelet last week, Psalm 46:10, that I'm wearing. Be still and know that I'm God. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating when you look at that term still doesn't mean do nothing. It means stand firm.
Right.
Hold your position. Hold your position. Because the world's going to keep spinning its way. Hold your position. I guess I've never until this interview thought about this related to news. I mean, I think about it in terms of my personal devotional life and running a ministry, but how we actually process the ideas that we're confronted with every day from this perspective.
Yeah. When I was probably in my late 20s, my spiritual parents said, "Hey, have you ever heard the Elijah list?" And I was like, "No, what is that?" And they said, "Well, it's like there's a daily email service and you can get like these prophetic words." And I was like, "I'll check it out." So I started reading it. So I've been reading it for a long time. I don't read it every day. But I started understanding, oh my gosh, like the way that God is viewing current events is really the only correct way to view them. It's like I can actually understand what's going on in the world around me because I understand why it's taking place. I understand the genesis of it, like what's going on right now with Israel and Hamas. If you understand the biblical roots of that, you understand the spiritual reality of what's happening. Like Hamas comes from Haman. And Haman was born because there was an Amalekite warrior who, I don't want to use that word, he violated an Israelite woman, and that was how Haman came to be. This terrible person in Queen Esther's court who wanted to wipe out the Jews, and so it's the spirit of violence, and that has continued, and that has become like a generational thing. So that's kind of where Hamas comes from. It's the same spirit that animates it, wants to wipe out the Jews. So the Bible tells us so much more than we realize. And it's not just a collection of stories, it's a collection of current events too.
Yeah, a lot of people are starting to get this sense. Even I was in Israel and we did a couple shows on it. So those who are following this program are already familiar with this. But while I was there, I visited with a Jewish friend, Orthodox Jew, and he said, "You'll never understand what's happening here if your perspective is geopolitical. But you
Exactly.
will understand it if your perspective is theopolitical."
Exactly.
Yeah. So I suppose that's true there, but it's true everywhere too.
Yeah.
Help us a little bit for the like I mentioned, we're filming this video course, which is basically about politics for the reluctant. Because
Oh,
most
gosh.
people, they just don't like it. They don't get into it. They're not following all the mean tweets and
Ugh.
this guy says this and this guy says this and oh gosh, this is so much fun. We love the battle. Most people are just like, would you please just make all of this go away?
Yeah.
Okay,
I get
so
that.
yeah, so speak to that person for a moment. Why should we care, and how should we care? That's different from the way just people in the world, our neighbors, care.
That's a good question, and I can relate to that person
Yeah.
because I was that person for so much of my life. I grew up in a very apolitical household, I would say. We didn't talk about it, but you know how you kind of just catch attitudes, that things are more caught than taught. Nobody ever really talked about it, but my perspective growing up was, hey, just don't get involved in all that political stuff because you can't really make a difference anyway, and it's just going to make you mad. And that was like, okay, so I didn't bother with it.
Yeah.
I just focused on things that I enjoyed, like most people do today. Until, I'm ashamed to say, it wasn't until I got married. I was in my mid-20s before I ever voted. And it was because my husband had taken a job and was writing for this magazine that focused on grassroots activism. And here's the presidential election coming up. He's like, you've never voted? What's wrong with you? You have to vote. If you don't vote, you can't, you've abdicated your responsibility. You can't complain about what happens if you're not even taking part, And I was like, oh, okay. So I thought about it, and I'd always called myself a Republican, but that was because when I was 7 years old, I read a book about Abraham Lincoln, and it's like, oh, he freed the slaves. If the Republican Party was good enough for him, it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a very well thought out position, but coming up on that presidential election, I was like, okay, what are my values? My values are informed by my faith. And this is important to me. This is right. This is wrong. And this is the party that most closely aligns with that. So that was kind of how I went that direction as an adult. Not to say that it's a perfect party. It's got its issues, obviously. But I took that responsibility seriously to, we have a representative government, that we have, as Christians, a responsibility to be salt and light. And that is one of the ways that we do it, is by actually being involved in what's going on in the world and not just check. It's easy to check out. And there are some things we definitely should check out of. The mean tweet situation, it gets out of hand. But when we can just sit down and just say, God, what are you saying? Where is your favor? What are you doing? Where are you going? And we can get like a forward-facing perspective on, what's right for the country and kind of see who most close, because nobody's perfect, but who most closely aligns with that, who has that heart to go in that direction. That will tell us a lot. Does that make sense?
I think that really helps because, we're looking for clarity. It just seems wrong that, that everything that we believe gets narrowed down to this binary choice in the voting booth. And I think it's a myth of politics that you're always choosing the lesser of two evils. I think the choice that you get in that situation is to lessen evil.
Right.
But that doesn't make it easy because you're still thinking, can't we? Seriously, these are the two. How do you give us a little bit of hope in the middle of that? When you feel like you're compromising what you really have as your core convictions, no matter what you decide.
Well, I mean, I think that's why the Bible says pray for your leaders. Pray for the people in authority over you, because good golly, they need it.
Yeah.
They really need it. And if all you're doing is cursing them and saying they did this wrong, they did that wrong, and oh my gosh, you're actually closing the heavens over them. You're actually making it harder for them to get wisdom and the revelation that they need to do their jobs effectively. But when you pray for people, especially people you don't like, especially with people you disagree with, I mean, don't pray soulish prayers over them, but ask for God's will to be done. Ask for them to have an encounter with him. Ask for an open heaven over them. Ask for, them to have a download in the night or something directly from the Lord that just unlocks that situation that needs to be unlocked in such a way that, ask for divine revelation. They need it.
Yeah.
They need it so badly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing that's very difficult for people to understand if they haven't been in this position. But if you're a mayor or a school board president or a governor or a president, the only problems that come to you are the ones nobody else can solve.
Right.
If it was easy, somebody else would have done it. So the only things that you're considering are things that are impossible. Mm-hmm. And you really need divine wisdom.
Yeah, and who's the source of that? So
Yeah.
it's not whoever their cabinet is. It's not whoever their closest campaign advisor is. It's the Lord. And so if we want them to be making godly decisions that reflect well, ask for him to give it to them. I mean, right?
Yeah. Karla, this is amazing. This is not the conversation I thought we would have. I thought we would talk about specific news items and things like that, but this is so much better because you've given us insight into somebody who is in the news business, wanting to reflect God's nature and character, to do it with personal integrity, and to lead a team doing that. A team of very diverse people who even have disagreements among themselves about how things should be done. And that's really special. Thank you. This has been a gift. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you to my guest, Karla Dial, for coming on the show. If you want more resources to help you live out a biblical worldview as a student, parent, educator, or church leader, you can check out The Stream and see the kinds of things that they're doing over there that Karla talked about in the show. You can also go to summit.org/resources for articles, videos, ebooks, and more, all available to you to help you think through a biblical worldview and how it applies even to the seemingly impossible issues of our day. Thanks for listening in. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. The Dr. Jeff Show podcast is a resource of Summit Ministries. Summit equips and supports the rising generation to embrace God's truth and champion a biblical worldview. If you want more resources that can help you live out a biblical worldview as a student or reach the next generation as an educator, church leader, or parent, head over to summit.org/resources to find out about the programs, the articles, the videos, the ebooks, and more that we offer. Also, if you're looking for more great podcasts that will build your faith and inspire you, our friends at Edify have what you need. You can find more podcasts, including the Dr. Jeff Show podcast, on the Edify app. Download it at edify.app, spell EDIFI. And then you can also search for it in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store.